In broad daylight, on a train travelling through leafy Surrey, a man was brutally stabbed to death in front of shocked onlookers. Today, we'll examine the case and look at the poor decisions that cost one man his life and another man a lengthy prison sentence. Lee Pomeroy was a father of one and had been married to his wife Svetlana for 18 years. At around 1 PM on Friday the 4th of January 2019, the day before his 52nd birthday, Pomeroy boarded a train at Guildford's London Road station. He was accompanied by his 14-year-old son. As the pair took their time to get seated, they apparently blocked the passageway for other train customers. Apparently out of frustration, one of those customers waiting to walk past made a snarky remark. It was something to the effect of, "Ignorance is bliss." Pomeroy would later be characterised by his son as someone who would never start a fight, but equally someone who would never not reply. True to form, Pomeroy decided to challenge the man who'd made the remark. Unbeknown to Pomeroy, this man was no ordinary train passenger. 36-year-old Darren Penseal had a history of mental health issues, including paranoid schizophrenia, as well as depression and anxiety. He was also violent. Years earlier, Penseal had spent time in prison after being convicted of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. In that case, after asking his housemate for some rolling papers, a dispute erupted, during which Penseal stabbed the man twice in the neck and once in the shoulder. In fact, Penseal had 14 previous convictions for 19 different offences over a 19-year period, including possession of offensive weapons, violence, and dishonesty. Of course, Pomeroy had no way of knowing exactly who he was dealing with. Instead of sitting down with his son and letting the man continue on his way, Pomeroy made the regrettable decision to follow Penseal. Apparently, Pomeroy was looking for an apology, but on reflection, this probably wasn't the wisest idea. In terms of the initial comment, "ignorance is bliss," there is such thing as freedom of speech, so if Penseal felt that Pomeroy had blocked the carriageway, he was quite entitled to make a throwaway comment if he wanted to. Pomeroy wasn't owed an apology for that. The fact Pomeroy couldn't just let it go speaks to a possible hint of arrogance, which in this case didn't serve him well. Penseal became aggressive very quickly, and again, instead of backing down and letting the other person have the final word, Pomeroy chose to follow Penseal through the train's carriages, apparently intent on achieving some kind of victory. He was heard asking Penseal what he meant by "ignorance is bliss." As things escalated, Penseal was heard warning Pomeroy.
"Oh, put your hand on it. I dare you. I dare you. Well, last year, Dean, I dare you. Put your hand on it. Put your hand on it. See what I'm nasty. Now, put your hand on me."
Penseal had a history of experiencing anxiety in social situations and would often phone his girlfriend whenever these feelings took hold. While being pursued by Mr. Pomeroy, he called his girlfriend, providing a running commentary on what was happening. Penseal used the phone call with his girlfriend as a proxy to issue a threat to Pomeroy, shouting, "I'm gonna kill this man," down the phone. He also shouted, "Leave me alone," and "You're racist." The entire altercation was captured on CCTV, and there were also multiple eyewitnesses. The court would later hear that at this point, Pomeroy was effectively blocking Penseal in. He was unable to move into any further carriages, and he was unable to leave the train because it was moving. Instead of walking away and going back to sit with his son in the next carriage over, Pomeroy continued to argue with Penseal for about 5 minutes. An unrelated eyewitness, Kaylee Carter, testified in court that Mr. Pomeroy appeared to be egging it on with Mr. Penseal. He was saying things like, "I've never dealt with someone with special needs before," and was described as being stern, stubborn, and patronising. Carter wouldn't say that Pomeroy was picking on Penseal, but she did say that he was taunting him. Penseal responded by warning Pomeroy that he was starting to hear voices. At 1:07 PM, Penseal pulled out his knife and launched a violent attack. In a 25-second flurry, he stabbed Pomeroy 18 times. The first wound was to the neck, severing Pomeroy's carotid artery. As Pomeroy bled to death, Penseal got off the train at the next stop, Clarendon Station. Penseal was picked up by his girlfriend Chelsea Mitchell. Mitchell, who had a child from a previous relationship, was described as having borderline learning difficulties and having a very low IQ. She also had 7 previous convictions for 10 different offences, including assault, threatening behaviour, drunken disorderly behaviour, and battery. The two travelled to her flat in Farnham in Surrey. There, Penseal discarded his blood-soaked clothes and shaved off his beard in an apparent attempt to change his appearance. After making another stop, they went on to visit Penseal's flat in Bognor Regis, West Sussex, before finally heading back to Mitchell's address in Farnham. After a short manhunt involving extensive media appeals, the pair was tracked down to their home in Farnham and they were arrested by armed police.
Hello. Hello? Someone please, can you just step out please? Just step outside the door. Come outside the door. Is it Chelsea? Yeah, just come outside the door. Is anyone else inside the property?
Yeah, Jimmy. Jimmy, armed police. Stay where you are at the moment and listen to my instructions. I want you to walk towards the door with your hands on display. Nothing in your hands, do you understand? If you get to the door, you will stop. Okay? And you will follow my instructions, do you understand? Walk slowly to the door with nothing in your hands. Keep walking, that's it, keep walking across. Okay? Turn round. Turn round. Place your hands on your head. Okay? Walk back towards by the door, mate. Walk slightly to the left. Slightly to the left. Nothing's going. If you do what I say, you're not going to get hurt, are you? Keep walking. Keep walking back. Keep walking back. Keep walking back. Stand still. Do not look at me. Stand still. Officer's going to take
Step to the
you
left.
and cuff
Step
you.
to the left. To the left. Face the wall. Face the wall. Stay. Do not move. Keep your hands there. Right, move your arms to your back. That's it. That's it.
What's this about, sir?
I'll tell you in a second.
Pomeroy's sister Kim was quoted as saying, "If this can happen to a 51-year-old man going about his business on a train in the middle of the day, this terrifies me, because if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody." But the sad reality is that Pomeroy was no longer just going about his business. He had made it his business to pursue Penseal and continue the confrontation. The senseless way Pomeroy was killed can never ever be justified. Clearly Penseal was an extremely dangerous man who needed to be locked away. But there is a lesson here, which is that unfortunately, there are dangerous people out there, and it's always best to avoid aggravating them. In my view, these were two men from completely different worlds, who were operating on different rules. In Pomeroy's world, when someone's rude to you or unduly aggressive towards you, they owe you an apology. In an ideal world, they apologise, you presumably accept that apology, and then you both move on. Disputes are won or lost on moral grounds, i.e., who has the superior moral argument for being in the right. But in Penseal's world, things work very differently. Penseal was a former gang member and still operates on the rules of the urban street crime subculture. There are no apologies. Disputes are won or lost based on who can dominate the other, first with aggressive posturing, and then, if necessary, with physical violence. Mitchell was charged with 1 count of assisting an offender. Penseal was charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of possession of a bladed article. The prosecution's case was therefore that Penseal was a sane person who had unlawfully killed another person, and that he had the intention to kill or cause grievous bodily harm. Mitchell claimed she hadn't realised what Penseal had done until around 9 hours later, essentially because of her learning difficulties. Penseal claimed that he killed Pomeroy in self-defence. However, he did choose not to testify at his trial. Other defence witnesses testified that Penseal found it difficult to cope with crowded places, such as shops, supermarkets, trains and hospitals. He would suffer from panic attacks. In her closing remarks, the judge, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, said of Penseal, "I am satisfied that you were the aggressor throughout. You picked on the wrong man, and he stood up for himself." This is quite a bizarre choice of words because the court heard that it was Pomeroy who followed and taunted Penseal, even though Penseal had walked away into a completely different train carriage. While Penseal obviously deserves to be locked away for that brutal and senseless murder, it's interesting that the judge wanted to paint a narrative that completely ignored the importance of Pomeroy's actions. Darren Penseal was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum tariff of 28 years before he can be eligible for parole. For Chelsea Mitchell, the judge concluded that she was most likely acting under a misguided sense of loyalty. Mitchell was found guilty by a majority verdict of 11-1 of assisting an offender. She was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison, meaning she likely spent about 14 months in custody and then the remaining 14 months on licence.